First try. I do the claps all the time. Oh, Dan, I'm gonna make some funnies on one of these rulings, and you're gonna have to make the funnies, okay? What's going on, guys? It's your boy DistinCoder, and welcome back to another episode of answering your ruling questions. Now, before we get started, as usual, don't forget that you can leave your ruling questions in the comment section of this video, and I'll go over them to look for the rulings for my next video. So without further ado, let's get right into the rulings. Okay, so this first ruling question comes to us from Extcn, and they ask if any of the Eldritch traps like Conquistador, Hekero, or Guardian get banished by the effect of Sky Striker Ace Zeke. Will they return to the field? If so, where do they return to, or do they stay banished? So in the case of traps that summon themselves as monsters, be it whether they're still considered trap cards or not considered trap cards anymore, so something like the Prime Monarch as opposed to the Eldritch trap cards, if they are temporarily banished by a card like Sky Striker Ace Zeke or like Farfa, basically what's going to happen is that when those cards would return to the field, they will return to the monster zone but immediately be sent to the graveyard, because since they've left the field, they no longer have that effect of staying in the monster zone as a monster. They instead will return to the monster zone because that's where they were banished from, but then they'll realize, I'm a trap card, I shouldn't be in this zone, and will automatically send itself to the graveyard. So in the case of Zeke or Farfa, against any of these trap monster type cards, they will immediately be sent to the graveyard as soon as they return to the monster zone. Alright, so this next ruling question comes to us from Beast and Vamp, and they ask, Hi Coder, if I have a Kaiju on field, can I still activate and resolve Interrupted Kaiju Slumber? Yes, you can. That's it. Oh, what? You wanna know why?
Yeah. Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, by all accounts, it doesn't make sense, but hey, I'll give you guys the explanation.
Konami said so.
Alright, this next ruling question comes to us from Mahinder Gaming HD, and they ask, does Zephyr Path or Royal Prison stop paleo traps in the graveyard? So basically, Zephyr Path is a continuous spell floodgate that only lets you special summon from hand or extra deck, and Royal Prison is a continuous trap card that prevents special summoning monsters from the graveyard. Now, they want to know if you can still summon paleo trap cards from the graveyard as monsters under either one of these floodgates. So in the case of Royal Prison, you are allowed to special summon a paleo from the graveyard under Royal Prison. Under Zephyr Path, however, you're not allowed. Now, to explain the reason why for this is that when you're summoning a Paleozoic trap card or any such trap monster from your graveyard, these monsters are considered special summoned as monsters. However, they're not considered special summoned from a certain location. So, for example, these paleo trap cards, they're not considered special summoned as monsters from the graveyard. They're just special summoned as monsters. So, under something like Vanity's Emptiness, you wouldn't be allowed to activate the paleos in the grave, but because they're not considered special summoned from a specific location, you are allowed to summon them under Royal Prison. Now, the interesting interaction with Zephyr Path, however, is that Zephyr Path only allows you to special summon from hand or extra deck. Now, because a trap monster being summoned isn't considered summoned from a specific location, it's neither summoning from hand nor the extra deck, so for that reason, you would not be allowed to special summon a paleo trap monster under the effect of Zephyr Path. Alright, this next question comes to us from Obi Senpai, and they ask, if my opponent controls There Can Be Only One, and I use a card like Madolche Angel that tributes itself as cost in order to summon a Madolche from the deck, and I control no other monsters, am I locked out of any monster types when Angeli's effect resolves? So, we know that when There Can Be Only One is on the field, you're not allowed to attempt to summon a monster of the same type as a monster you control. If the only monster on your field is Madolche Angel, which contributes itself as cost to special summon any Madolche from the deck, you have to have a non-fairy type target in your deck. However, when you do activate the effect of Angeli, you are allowed to tribute the Angeli for its effect, and then when the effect resolves, because you no longer control any types, you are allowed to special summon a fairy type monster. So in order for the activation to be legal, you would have to have a legal target of a different type, but because the activation was legal, at the point of resolving, because you don't control any types, you can summon any type from your deck, including the same as the type of Angeli. Okay, this next ruling question comes to us from Holy Nacho, and they ask, if I activated the effect of Fleur de Lis to boost the attack of herself, and my opponent activates a negation effect like Dark Ruler No More in the following turn, why does Fleur de Lis not drop back to 2.5k attack, and how is it different from, for example, an Apollosa? So, when it comes to negating the effects of monsters that have an effect to boost stats, you need to consider one specific thing. So, I'm going to compare the Fleur de Lis to something like Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Fleur de Lis, if it does boost itself and even if it boosts other monsters around it or not, if you negate its effect, it will not drop back to whatever its original attack was. Now, if you compare that to something like Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, if Red Eyes Dark Dragoon boosts itself by, say, 1,000 attack by its own effect, and then you negate the effects of the Dragoon will drop back to 3,000 attack. Now, the reason why this is different is because cards like Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, cards like Dante Traveler of the Burning Abyss, these cards only have an effect that boosts themselves. So because the card only boosts itself, if you negate its effects after that effect has already resolved and been applied, it will lose the stat boost that it gave to itself. Now, if you compare that to something like Fleur de Lis or Giga Brilliant, these cards have an effect that not only boosts themselves, but other monsters around it. So because the card has the ability to boost other cards and not only itself, it will not lose the boost under something that would negate its effect. So even if Fleur de Lis only boosts itself, it doesn't have another Dogmatica card to boost around it, it will still not lose the boost if it does get negated, even though it only boosted itself. Because its effect can boost other monsters around it, it will not lose the boost if it is negated. Alright, this next ruling question comes to us from Mike, and they ask, if I activate a monster effect and my opponent negates it with a counter trap that negates and destroys, can I protect it using Balinx or Dingirsu, or I cannot because they would use their effect after a counter trap? So, in the case of something like Dingirsu or Balinx, their effects are not activated effects. They're not effects that you chain to a previous effect in that same chain. The way Bale and Dingirsu resolve is that they are instead effects. At the moment when your card would be destroyed, instead of destroying it, you will banish the Balinx or you'll detach from your Dingirsu. So because this applies in the middle of a chain resolving rather than chaining to an effect, you can protect a monster that would be destroyed by a counter trap via the effect of Balinx or Dingirsu. So whenever your monster, say, activates its effect and you get Solemn Strike, when the Solemn Strike resolves, your monster's effect will be negated, but when it would be destroyed, you can simply banish the Balinx or detach from the Dingirsu and your monster won't be destroyed. Alright, so this last ruling question of the day comes to us from Florian, and they ask, I activate Widow Anchor with 3+ spells in graveyard to steal one of my opponent's monsters. He chains his own Widow Anchor on the same monster. Will my Widow Anchor steal the targeted monster? So, the way Widow Anchor is worded, it says negate the targeted monster's effects, then you can take control of it. So when you have a then effect, you need to successfully do the A portion of its effect in order to be allowed to apply the B portion of its effect. So in this case, Widow Anchor needs to successfully negate the effects of the monster that it targeted in order to be allowed to take it. So in this situation, because that monster already had its effects negated, when the Widow Anchor attempts to apply to that monster, it won't be able to negate its effects because that monster already has its effects negated. So because the Widow Anchor doesn't successfully negate the effects of the monster that it targeted, it will not be able to take control of that monster afterwards because you didn't successfully perform A, therefore you cannot perform B. So that's it for this episode of answering your ruling questions. Thank you so much for coming out. I appreciate you guys. Don't forget to leave your ruling questions in the comment section of this video. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good one, guys. Peace.